Okay, so natural sequence farming began with Peter Andrews. Who's heard of Peter Andrews? Okay, so I guess all of you guys that have heard of Peter Andrews have heard of natural sequence farming. So you got a bit of an idea? How many people have been to a day where PAs run something? How many of you came out unscathed? He's fairly brutal. Yeah, well, that's how I grew up, with that brutality. So I had to learn to get a very thick skin very quickly. But the thing is, people like PA usually delivering a very difficult message, and most of the time people don't want to listen. And I use the analogy of a sledgehammer or a mallet or a ball peen hammer, and he's definitely a sledgehammer. Yep. So his role is to come and hit you over the head fairly hard so that you stop and think about what it is you're doing. The unfortunate part is generally you don't like being hit over the head with a sledgehammer. So it relies on somebody else coming through with a slightly softer touch, which I hope you can judge by the end of the day whether I can give a slightly softer touch. But anyway, it all started with PA. And through my time growing up with PA, I realised that his message was not getting through. I would watch him talk at things like this, or where people came to the farm, and people would nod, but with no clue as to what he just said. And so it was just simply, I would add in little pieces here and there to help the clarity of what he just said. And people go, oh, is that what he was talking about? And so it's about looking at the simplicity of the message rather than the complexity. So I hope that's what I get through today. So we started our training course in 2012, and I was talking to Mark here earlier. He was at one of our first ever training courses that we ran up here in central Queensland, and for me that was a big thing to come up. I left our home block and I came to country that I was not familiar with at all. And what I realised with doing that and many others afterwards, that all the landscapes are the same. It doesn't matter where you go, they all have the same patterns. Yeah, they've got different soil types, all sorts of things are different, but the patterns are consistent wherever you go. So that's the beauty of this stuff that we're talking about, is if you use that knowledge here, you could go down to Tasmania and use the same knowledge. Different soil, different climate, patterns, all the same. And that's, I think, what's really important, because people would say, oh, well, if I come and do your course, I got a call the other day and they said, oh, if I come and do your course, but I'm in Western Australia, will it be the same if I come and do the course at Gympie? I said, yeah, it'll be just the same. The only difference will be whether you can relate to the patterns and processes. It's all the same. Anyway, we started this training program to get PA's information out. This information is not mine, and he would say it's not his. This information belongs in the landscape. All of his answers, all of the things that he talks about, he got out of reading the landscape. And then using what the landscape's done in a form that fits our production systems that we run today. I've just got a short little video here which will probably cover a few bits and pieces. Park training allows you to understand how this landscape functioned long before any human interference. So we spend our time teaching people how to read the landscape, understand the functions that used to exist, and then implementing soft works that enable that function to operate again, whilst we overlay it with our production systems, whatever they may be. And for everybody that might be different, maybe cropping, maybe grazing, maybe horticulture, all sorts of different things. It's more about getting the landscape to function so that these production systems work very well.
The biggest benefit of Tarwyn Park training is getting people out in their landscape, looking at where that they can improve things, where they can look at slowing flows of water, because it's so desperately needed everywhere.
Tarwyn Park training teaches you the 5 pillars of natural sequence farming so that you can use them to restore your landscape. They are: slow the flow, let all plants grow, care for where the animals go, filtration is a must know, and return it to the top to recycle the lot.
Each of the 5 pillars of natural sequence farming have a practical application out in the landscape, and in our Tarwyn Park training we teach people how to put that into practice on their landscape.
Slowing the flow in action could include practical applications such as contours and hill ponds and gully ponds, which all act to slow the flow of water and fertility moving across the landscape and promote it being stored under the surface where plants can access it more readily, and it's not being lost to our rivers and creeks and eventually to the ocean or evaporation from the sun.
When I'm building a contour, I use an excavator, and using an excavator I'm able to sculpt the bank to the height that I want it to be, as well as making sure that it's the right level and make sure the spillways are put in the correct location for it to function the best way properly.
Let all plants grow means that we want to focus on diversity, and as much diversity as possible, as all plants growing, no matter what they are, fill 5 key roles for our landscape, and they include solar-powered air conditioners, moisture magnets, processing factories, soil builders and pumps.
One of my favourite things to see is when I go out in the paddock, I'm able to see the change that happens, the new plants that come in, as well as trying to figure out why they're there and what the job is they're trying to do.
Pillar number 3 for Tarwyn Park training is careful where the animals go. And behind that is about understanding that we need to manage our animals in a way that suits both them for a production focus for our farm, but also an ecological focus, and ensuring that they are looking after the landscape and not causing it any undue issues.
When I'm being careful where the animals go, I'm making sure that whatever stock it is in the correct paddock for the right amount of time, make sure they're not affecting the land in a negative way. As well as that, I want to make sure the animals are always happy and they have the best place to be, and happy animals make me happy.
Pillar number 4 is filtration is a must-know. Filtration is an extremely important process of our landscape.
The aim with filtration is to make sure that when your water is moving through the landscape, that it's clean and that everything that's flowing through it is being absorbed by the plants, all the minerals and different things like that. And the aim is that when you see that water flowing across your property, it's usually better to drink it because it's perfectly clean.
Pillar number 5 is return to the top to recycle the lot. The big thing is about collecting fertility that's moved down, taking it back up to the top and putting it there to break down and then feed it all back down. So rather than letting everything be lost, we're actually letting it recycle over and over again, which is how nature always operated, and we're just getting that started all over again.
Return to the top to recycle a lot is cutting and carting hay from the bottom to the top, animals grazing and then pooping again back at the top of the system, and pumping water that's been moved down to the bottom through the system back to the top to be recycled again.
I think it's really important that we work on our Australian landscapes. As a mum with children, it gives me great hope that there is a great future and things can be moving forward and getting better right across the country.
You can get going with natural sequence farming by going onto the Tarwyn Park Training website. You can sign up to a 4-day course. We also have our upcoming online courses, and there will be a community for people to join that have done one of those trainings, so you can learn with other like-minded people. So this is the guy. Always like to acknowledge PA, even though he's created a challenging past for me and probably for some other people. He deserves to be acknowledged because the work that he's done, none of us would be here, or at least I wouldn't be here today talking about this stuff. So always acknowledge him. And he is still alive, just in case anybody thinks that he might not be. I can assure you the phone calls that I get from him fairly regularly definitely reminds me that he's alive. Yep. So I'm going to go through this general knowledge quiz. Now, it's a little bit difficult to get you to answer these questions in this format, so don't worry, but what I want you to do is I want you to think about the question and what an answer could be, because it involves thinking about the landscape and how it works. So what are the 2 free energies that run your farm? How many people have been to something that I've put on before? So some of you will know the answers to these, so you're not allowed to say anything, because these are general questions we ask all the time. And they're important to think about because most of the time we give it no thought. So the 2 free energies that run your farm are sunlight and gravity. So you think about that. Why are those two things important? Sunlight is what grows all of the plants on your farm. Gravity is the thing that carries everything off of your farm. Yep. So if you're not managing those two, then you could easily be going backwards. So focusing it to a really simple level. How do you assess your basic farm productivity? Somebody will say how much money's in the bank. Pretty obvious, isn't it? You'd think that. It's how much total green surface area you have on your farm. Because the amount of green surface area you have determines how much productivity you have. Yep, which then goes back to the first question. So the more green surface area, the more you're able to manage sunlight and gravity. What's the purest and most readily available water for plants on your farm? You'll probably say rainfall or groundwater, because I've had these answers many, many times before. It's actually dew, the fogs and the mists that you receive every morning. Where did that water come from? That water came from the plants, the green plants that evapotranspired the day before, which means the water goes up through the plant, grows the matter, the water goes up into the atmosphere, and at night it's brought back down to the surface where it returns. Now, the moment you don't have green plants, does the water still go out of your soil? The answer is yes. Where does it go then? The answer is to the person with green plants. So the moment you don't have green plants, your moisture is going one direction, off of your place to somewhere else. So your aim is to keep as many green plants in the system as possible. Where does the energy that powers the cyclones, typhoons and tornadoes, where does that come from? It comes from that water that's evaporated out of our landscape, not evapotranspired via plants. It's evaporated out of the landscape. It rises up to the upper levels of our atmosphere. It moves to somewhere where it's cooler, at which time it changes state from gas to a liquid, and it constricts back. And that's what creates these storms. And we're seeing some of these storms becoming more frequent, where your rain events, rather than being regular, are one-off big storm events. And that's because of the dysfunction of our system, because of the way we've managed our plants. Yep. How do you maintain how do landscapes maintain their fertility balance? Now this one's always a challenging one. So one way nature does that is with edible and inedible plants. So if you think about a situation where maybe some of you have had over the time, if by some chance, not that I'm suggesting that any of you would have ever overgrazed any paddocks, ever, but if you happen to have done that occasionally, what's the response? What does nature do? What plants does it send up? It quite often sends up ones that your animals won't eat. And that's a direct result of your management. That's why it did that. It didn't actually send these plants in to annoy you. It did it for a purpose, because the conditions said that now these plants need to be in there because your management has created those conditions. So having these edible and inedible plants as part of the system are critical. It doesn't mean that we want our place covered in inedible plants, because if you're running a grazing operation, not going to be very productive, is it? No. Dryland salinity. Anyone here know anything about, do you guys have any dryland salinity? I suspect probably not, most of you not. Does salt rise against gravity, or do you think it's moved laterally? What have you been told? It rises? We've been told for years that salt rises. Well, actually, in actual fact, it does not rise. If you were to do an experiment and you got 2 glasses, you can try this at home, 2 glasses of fresh water. In one glass, put a couple of drops of food dye. In the other glass, put a couple of teaspoons of salt. Stir the salt up and then carefully add some of the dyed fresh water into the salt. What do you think happens? The dyed fresh water sits on top of the salt, because the salt is actually more dense than the fresh water, so the fresh water sits on top. So if you see salt rising, it's because there is no fresh water.